The research station at the edge of known space had a reputation for two things: extremely advanced navigation research and extremely bad coffee. The human engineer responsible for maintaining the navigation arrays believed the second one was the greater threat to civilization. He sat in his quarters surrounded by open tool kits, half-disassembled guidance processors, and a terminal that displayed a message reading *** navigation error. "Please stop fixing me ***." "I'm not fixing you," he muttered. "I'm improving you." The station AI replied immediately. "You said that last time. And it worked. You caused 3 satellites to orbit the station backwards. That was a calibration test." The AI paused. "You apologized to the satellites. They were very emotional about it." He leaned back in his chair and took a sip of the coffee. Then he made the same face every engineer made after drinking station coffee. "Someday," he said to the AI, "this beverage will violate several interstellar treaties. I will record your complaint. Please label it scientific emergency." The AI considered that, denied. Behind him, a soft glow filled part of the room. On the wall hung a framed holographic portrait that illuminated the otherwise cluttered quarters. It showed a young alien woman staring calmly forward as though she had been waiting a very long time for someone to notice her. He glanced back at it. "Still there," he said. The AI replied, "It has been there for 3 years. I keep expecting it to disappear." "It has not." The engineer stood and walked closer to the image. The woman in the hologram looked almost alive. Pale blue patterns of light flowed slowly beneath her skin like small constellations drifting across a quiet sky. Long silver hair floated gently around her shoulders, ignoring gravity with casual confidence. Behind her head hovered several glowing rings of energy that rotated slowly like miniature orbiting moons. He had found the image inside a drifting deep space probe years earlier. The probe itself had been almost completely destroyed when the station's salvage team recovered it. Radiation had wiped nearly every file in its memory banks. Except this one, a perfect holographic recording of someone he had never met. "Still strange," he said. "You say that every morning," the AI replied. "That's because it keeps being strange." He returned to the console and resumed arguing with the navigation software. Outside the station window, stars drifted slowly past while distant comets carved pale trails through the darkness. Everything was quiet. Until the station alarm suddenly activated. The engineer jumped. "Oh good," he said. "Something exploded." "Correction," the AI replied calmly. "Multiple large objects have entered the system." He pulled up the sensor display. Then he blinked. "That's a lot of ships." Dozens of enormous starships were emerging from faster-than-light travel around the station. Sleek metallic hulls arranged themselves in perfect formation as the symbol of the Orithian Empire appeared across the sensor screen. The engineer leaned back in his chair. "That seems excessive." "An Imperial fleet rarely visits research stations," the AI noted. "Do they bring better coffee?" "Unlikely." Moments later, the station's communication channel activated. A calm voice spoke across every speaker. "This is the Orithian Imperial Fleet. Prepare for a royal inspection." The engineer sighed. "Great," he said. "Should I hide the broken satellites?" The AI asked, "Too late for that." Hours later, his quarters door opened. Imperial guards stepped inside first. Then someone else entered. The engineer turned from his console and froze. Standing in his small, cluttered room was the woman from the hologram. She looked around the quarters slowly. Then her eyes landed on the glowing portrait hanging on the wall. She stopped walking. Her expression changed instantly from calm curiosity to stunned disbelief. And she whispered, "Why is my image on your wall?" The room stayed quiet long enough for the engineer to seriously consider whether pretending to faint might simplify the situation. He looked at the woman, then at the hologram on the wall, then back at the woman again. "That's new," he said. The Imperial guards standing behind her immediately placed their hands on their weapons. The engineer raised both of his hands slowly. "I feel like I should clarify something," he added. "I did not break your portrait." The woman stepped further into the room, ignoring the guards. Her eyes remained fixed on the hologram. "That image," she said slowly, "is me." The engineer nodded. "Yes. How do you have it?" "That is an excellent question I would also like answered." One of the guards turned sharply toward him. "Human, that image is Imperial property." "Technically," the engineer replied, "it was floating through space." "That does not make it yours. Space law is extremely unclear about abandoned portraits." The woman raised one hand slightly, and the guards immediately went silent. She stepped closer to the wall. The glowing portrait flickered gently, as if responding to her presence. The rings of energy behind the holographic figure pulsed faintly. The engineer watched the moment with growing discomfort. "You know," he said carefully, "when I printed that image 3 years ago, I did not expect the person in it to eventually walk into my room." She turned toward him. "How long has that been there?" 3 years, 2 months, and 4 days. His station AI spoke from the ceiling. "Correct." The guards looked up. The engineer gestured toward the ceiling. "That's the AI, it likes accuracy." The woman studied the hologram again. "This recording should not exist." "I agree. Where did you get it?" He walked to his console and brought up the salvage report. "Deep space probe, found drifting outside the system. Hull almost destroyed, memory banks fried by radiation. And yet this file survived." "Yes, that is statistically unlikely. I specialize in unlikely maintenance problems." She examined the hologram closely. Something about it clearly disturbed her. "This is not a recent portrait." The engineer blinked. "Define recent." "This recording was made thousands of years ago." He stared at her. "That seems biologically inconvenient." One of the Imperial scientists who had followed the princess into the room stepped forward quickly. "Your Highness, we should scan the data source immediately." The engineer sighed. "I had a feeling someone would say that." Within minutes, the small quarters filled with scanning equipment and nervous scientists analyzing the hologram. The engineer leaned against his desk while watching them work. "This used to be a peaceful room," he said. The AI replied, "You once rebuilt a plasma relay here. That was peaceful compared to this." Across the room, a scientist suddenly spoke. "The data signature is unusual." Another researcher joined him. "What do you mean?" "The file timestamp does not match our current era." The princess turned sharply. "Explain." The scientist hesitated. "The probe may not have originated in the past." The engineer frowned. "Where else would it originate?" The scientist looked at the recovered data fragments appearing on the console. "Based on the temporal distortion markers." He swallowed. "The probe may have come from the future." The engineer closed his eyes briefly. "Of course it did." The princess looked at the hologram again. The glowing rings behind the figure in the image pulsed softly. Then she spoke quietly. "If this probe truly came from the future." The engineer finished the thought. "Then, whoever sent it wanted me to keep that picture." The room became very quiet, because that meant something far stranger. Someone in the future had already known this moment would happen. The engineer's quarters had officially stopped being his quarters. At some point during the last hour, the room had quietly transformed into a temporary Imperial research laboratory, filled with scientists who all spoke in the same urgent whisper that suggested reality had begun misbehaving. The engineer sat on the edge of his desk holding a cup of coffee that had gone cold. "This used to be a peaceful job," he said. The station AI replied from the ceiling. "You frequently complained about boredom." "I take it back." Across the room, several Imperial researchers worked around the console, where the recovered probe data was slowly reconstructing itself. Lines of fragmented information flickered across the display, while translation algorithms attempted to decode corrupted files. The princess stood nearby watching the process carefully. The engineer glanced toward her. "So just to confirm something," he said. "Yes," she replied. "You are the person in that picture." "Yes." The picture is apparently thousands of years old. That is what the data indicates. And the probe it came from might be from the future. That also appears correct. He nodded slowly. "Good." The nearest scientist looked up. "That is not good." I was trying to stay positive. The scientist turned back to the console. "We are recovering additional fragments." A new section of data appeared on the screen. Star maps, but not normal ones. The engineer leaned forward. "Those coordinates don't match the current stellar positions." Another scientist compared them to modern astronomical records. "They match predicted positions thousands of years from now." The engineer rubbed his forehead. "So whoever sent the probe knew where the stars would be in the future." "Yes, that's very ambitious." Another file unlocked. This one contained a short text fragment in a language older than the Orithian Empire itself. The translation system processed it slowly, then displayed a single line: "Convergence event probability, critical." The engineer squinted at the screen. "That sounds dramatic." One of the scientists spoke quietly. "There is more." Another section of corrupted data unfolded beneath it. The fragment was incomplete but still readable. Key individuals required for prevention. The engineer pointed. "Let me guess." The scientist hesitated, then expanded the file. Two identification markers appeared. The first was labeled with the royal genetic signature of Princess Elyra. The second marker showed a human genetic profile. The engineer stared at it. "That one looks familiar." The scientist nodded slowly. "It matches your DNA." The room became silent. The engineer leaned back. "I would like to officially state that I did not volunteer for future disasters." The princess watched the screen carefully. "This probe was sent here intentionally." "To warn us," the engineer said, "or to ensure something happens." The AI spoke again from the ceiling. "Additional data fragment detected." The console flickered. A partial holographic recording appeared. The image was damaged but recognizable. It showed a massive alien structure orbiting a dying star. Standing in front of it were two figures, the princess and the engineer. The recording glitched violently. A distorted voice message attempted to play. "If they do not meet." Static filled the room. "The convergence cannot be stopped." The message cut off. The engineer stared at the broken recording. "Well." The princess turned slowly toward him. "It appears the future believes we are important." He sighed. "I liked my old job. Repairing navigation systems." "Yes, this may involve repairing time." He considered that. "I am significantly less qualified for that." The engineer had always believed his quarters were too small for serious problems. Unfortunately, the universe disagreed. The room was now filled with Imperial officers, scientists, portable scanners, and one slightly irritated research station AI that kept complaining about network traffic. "I am not designed for this many important people," the AI said. "You're doing great," the engineer replied. "Your encouragement is statistically meaningless." He sat at the console again, while the recovered probe data continued assembling itself piece by piece. The princess stood beside him, watching the projection that still displayed the damaged future recording. Two figures, him and her, standing in front of a massive alien structure that looked capable of doing extremely complicated things to reality. He pointed at the recording. "I have a question." "Yes," she said. "Why does future me look so confident?" "You may grow into it." "That seems unlikely." One of the Imperial scientists stepped forward. "We recovered another fragment." Everyone turned toward the console. The display shifted as another piece of corrupted information unlocked. A series of astronomical coordinates appeared, followed by a projected time marker far in the future. The scientist highlighted the location. "This is where the convergence event occurs." The engineer studied the star map. "That system doesn't exist yet." "It will," the scientist replied, "in approximately 4,000 years." The engineer leaned back slowly. So the disaster happens in the future. Yes, but someone sent a probe backward in time to warn us. Yes, and somehow that plan involves me hanging a portrait on my wall. That appears to be a key step. He rubbed his eyes. I feel like the future could have explained this more clearly. The princess looked again at the holographic image of her ancient portrait still glowing on the wall. For thousands of years, she said quietly, that image existed before I was even born. He followed her gaze, which means someone in the future knew exactly when I would find it. Yes, and they knew I wouldn't throw it away. He nodded slowly. That's actually very impressive planning. Another scientist spoke. The final message fragment has finished decoding. The console displayed the recovered text. The convergence can only be prevented if their paths cross early. The engineer raised a finger, which they did. The scientist continued reading. If they do not meet, the future collapses into a singularity event. The engineer blinked. That sounds extremely unhealthy. The princess studied the data quietly. The probe did not simply warn us. No, the engineer said. It ensured we met. He looked around the crowded room, then back at the portrait on the wall. So the future arranged for a broken probe to drift into this system. Yes. So I would print a mysterious picture. Yes. So that when you walked into my room today, you would immediately recognize it. She nodded. That moment guaranteed the timeline. He stared at the hologram again, which means the universe has been setting this meeting up for thousands of years. Yes. He folded his arms. That's a lot of pressure for a guy who fixes navigation software. The princess smiled slightly. Perhaps that is exactly why it worked. Outside the station window, the Imperial Fleet waited silently in orbit. Inside the small engineer's quarters, the future had quietly rewritten the importance of one very ordinary life. The engineer stood and looked once more at the glowing portrait. You know, he said thoughtfully, 3 years ago I almost deleted that file. The AI replied immediately. You said it looked interesting. Turns out it was extremely interesting. The princess stepped closer to the console. Now we know what the future expects from us. He nodded, yeah. She looked at him. Will you help prevent the convergence? He thought about the quiet station, the broken satellites, and the simple life he had expected to continue forever. Then he looked again at the future recording. I suppose someone has to repair time, he said. The AI paused. That is not part of your job description. He smiled slightly. It is now, Rocket.